It's time for my favorite video of the week. From Dragonite to Clodsire EX to Leafeon, I've dug through thousands of tournament deck lists to find you the most interesting things that had above average win rates. Let's go ahead and dive on in to our new decks roundup for the week. To kick things off, we have a Dragonite Giratina deck list that went 8-1 in the tournament it was played in. I actually featured this deck list last week on the channel. I'll link that in the video description down below if you want to see some gameplay with it. From a pure theory standpoint, this deck list has a really powerful game plan. You lead on your Druddigon, giving up 1 knockout point as they clear through that, taking some chip damage from its rough skin. You follow up with Dragonite, 160 HP additional single knockout point Pokemon that can sometimes win the game completely on its own with a Draco Meteor or two. And then finally, if they're able to get through both of your dragons, you finish on Giratina EX, cracking for that 130 points per turn that quickly picks up whatever remaining points you need to win the game. One really potent thing that this deck has going for it is that it's not all in on either of its two strategies. If there's a game where you're getting bit by 2 color variants or stage 2 variants with your Dragonite, you can just charge up Giratina and it can often carry games completely on its own, especially when it's backed up by a copy of Irida helping you heal it and Rocky Helmet letting you dish out a little bit of additional damage. And on the other side of the coin, there's games where your Giratina doesn't show up early enough to get charged with Psychic Energy, and your Dragonite is able to just drop a couple of Dracos and win the game completely on its own as well. I was honestly really impressed with this deck when I loaded up a variation of it to play on stream, and I'm not surprised to see it pick up a tournament result this week. Next up, we have the 16 trainer Wugtrio deck that I used for my entirety of my Great Ball Climb and a good chunk of my Ultra as well. This particular deck list put up a 7-3 finish in the tournament that it was played in, but this archetype in general put up more than one result this week across all the community tournaments. While this deck list is obviously a pretty optimal ladder grinding deck, you get some free wins and your games are often quick, win, lose, or otherwise. I do think it's genuinely powerful as well. Any game where you hit with a Misty or a Team Rocket Grunt and you get your Wugtrio attacking, it cracks for 150 really quickly or after putting your opponent behind a step. And when you combine this with the healing from Irida and extra sustain from capes and potions, you really get a combination that's able to win a ton of games. One of the real value pieces of Wugtrio, I think, is that it makes the game really unpredictable for both players. Pokemon Pocket's a game where skilled players are often planning out multiple turns ahead, and Wugtrio kind of puts this big question mark in key spots of the game where neither player really knows how it's going to play out, making it difficult for good players to strategize accordingly against you. Next up, we have a Clodsire Grafaiai deck list that went 7-2 in the tournament that it was played in. I think it's pretty noteworthy that Arceus has fallen off fairly hard. While it's not non-existent, it's definitely not the ever-present threat that you're running into constantly in a world where Giratina and Darkrai seem to be rising to the top. This gives Clodsire's effect a lot of breathing room since there's more things in the metagame that can actually be poisoned. When I took this deck list for a spin, I was really impressed with its draws where you have first energy advantage, hitting with Wooper and poisoning them, and then evolving into Clodsire lets you take a knockout on your opponent's first Pokemon very quickly. And then with Grafaiai set up in the back, you get to flip a coin every turn to jump that up to 130 damage per cycle sustained, but even dealing 60 is still pretty solid. In a lot of ways, this Clodsire setup reminded me of playing with Executor from previous metagames. You have this 160 HP stage 1. It has a guaranteed big hit once it sets up the poison, and then you have coin flips to continually have big hits on turns after that. Also similar to Executor decks from previous seasons, this Clodsire variation is leaning into the sustain aspect of this Pokemon very heavily, playing not only 2 copies of Giant Cape, but also 2 copies of Pokemon Center Lady to keep your beefy attacker alive for as long as possible. Up next, we have a Leafeon Darkrai variation that went 5-1 in the tournament that it was played in. You should note that this deck list is only playing Dark Energy to trigger Darkrai every single turn that you have it, since Leafeon brings its own Grass Energy along thanks to its Pokemon ability. There are a few upsides to playing Leafeon over the more traditional Darkrai Weavile that I can think of. The first is that Leafeon is more self-sufficient. It's able to hit for that 70 every single turn without needing a Darkrai chip shot to help it along. The second is that it helps you diversify the typings in your decks, which specifically helps with your weaknesses. In particular, Meowscarada hits Weavile and Darkrai for 150 damage or 170 with a copy of Red, which means they always go down in a single hit to one of the more common cards in our current metagame. Leafeon being weak to fire lets you kind of solve that problem. If I was looking to test and tune this deck list a little bit, I really like the fact that it's playing both Cape and 2 copies of Potion for a little bit sustain, and I think you could lean into that even a little bit further with your copies of Leafeon, playing an Erica or 2 to make your front line just that much tankier. Speaking of Meowscarada, we have a Meowscarada Wigglytuff deck that went 7-1 and 7-0-1 in 2 different tournaments in this past week. I would not be too surprised if something close to this ended up being one of the forefront ways to play one of the most potent stage 2s from our latest expansion. In particular, this deck list has all 1 knockout point Pokemon, meaning you never get caught with your Stray Executor or Beedrill in your lead, giving your opponent a direct way to knock out just 2 things and clean you out. The other upside to playing Meowscarada with a colorless Pokemon as its supplement is that it allows your baby cat to always be drawing your cat evolution, since you're grabbing specifically grass Pokemon, making it a little bit more consistent to hit your stage 2 on curve. And finally, because these deck lists are playing Erica and lots of other sustain cards, the healing that this new Wigglytuff can provide from your bench has a lot of value because it gets used in tandem with all of the others to make it just that much more difficult to clear through your beefy attacker that's cracking for 130 into most meta decks early and often. Speaking of Meowscarada being paired with other efficient 1 knockout point Pokemon, Meowscarada Magnezone went 6-2 in the Swiss rounds of the Ursi Day tournament this weekend, featuring the full 12 stage 2 Pokemon lines, with Red being the primary other utility card they're playing in their limited number of trainers. This deck list is looking to evolve ASAP and start cracking for large amounts of damage as soon as possible. I like that Magnezone just kind of gives you this steady stream of really heavy hitters that are all 1 point with high HP pools, making your opponent crack through 420 health every single game to get a win is going to be difficult for a lot of decks to overcome. I also like that Magnezone can help make up for the fact that Meowscarada's attacks are a little bit limp into non-EX Pokemon, while Magnezone doesn't discriminate, hitting everything for 110 in one go. Speaking of Magnezone, we had a Hitmonlee fighting variation of Magnezone as well as a Metal Skarmory variation of Magnezone go 6-2 in the Swiss rounds of the respective tournaments that they were played in. While neither of these deck lists are brand new to Pokemon Pocket in general, they are new to our current metagame in finding success in these larger tournament results, and I like showcasing these types of deck lists. I think they serve as a good reminder to everyone at home that it's really easy to forget about the older things that had fallen out of past metagames for various reasons that are potentially worth revisiting again that you can find success with. Both of these deck lists here did get a small upgrade from our latest expansion of Iono, allowing them to assemble that Magnezone as their stage 2 finisher a little bit more consistently than they previously were, which is definitely noteworthy. I would love to hear in the comments down below which older cards from our first few expansions you think are potentially going back and revisit, and why, so I can take a look at them as I'm working on climbing up to Masters on my upcoming streams. While I have yet to dig into the nitty-gritty statistically backed details ahead of tomorrow's meta report, anecdotally it looks like there's still a ton of different things finding success in this metagame. We don't have one clear standout best deck like we did in the previous format with Dialga Arceus before the Shining Revelry pack dropped. If you want to make sure you stay on top of the best decks at the top of the metagame, make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss that meta report tomorrow. And remember, if you want to see a bunch of the decks in this video already highlighted, I'm going to link gameplay of them in the video description down below, because as always, we were one step ahead of what's going to be successful here in Hogalandia. If you enjoyed today's best decks roundup, I ask that you please smash that like button on this video to hopefully help it reach some more people. I appreciate everybody that made it all the way through to the end, and I hope your next Pokemon Pocket Pack is an excellent one.